My father spent 30 years telling anyone who would listen that I lacked the spine for serious litigation. He called my career soft law and swore I would never be a real lawyer. For a long time, I believed him. But this morning, I sat at the head of the conference table in my own firm and opened a confidential acquisition file. The applicant wasn't a stranger, it was his firm, and they were begging us to save them. The courtroom air was stale, recycled through vents that hadn't been cleaned since the Reagan administration. It smelled of floor wax and anxious sweat. I stood behind the plaintiff's table, my hand resting flat on the stack of files that represented 3 years of my client's life. Judge Holloway looked over his spectacles at the defense counsel, a man named Sterling who wore a suit that cost more than my client's delivery van. Sterling had spent the last 2 hours trying to bury us in procedural objections, using $50 words to hide a 10-cent lie. I waited. Silence is a weapon if you know how to hold it. Counsel, the judge said, his voice gravelly. Do you have a response to the motion to dismiss? I didn't look at my notes. I didn't need them. I knew the page numbers, the precedent, and the dates by heart. I knew that on November 12th, 2 years ago, the defendant had signed the contract. I knew that on January 4th, they had breached it. Your Honor, I said, keeping my voice level. Grounded in the center of the room, Mr. Sterling argues that the contract was ambiguous, but if you look at Exhibit C, you will see an email from his client's own chief financial officer explicitly confirming the payment terms. Ambiguity is a shield for the confused, not the calculated. This was calculated. I saw the judge's eyes flicker to the exhibit. He nodded. Once, that was the tell. Motion denied. Holloway ruled. We proceed to trial. Sterling slumped just a fraction of an inch. My client, a woman named Sarah, who ran a commercial bakery and had almost lost everything because a supplier decided she was too small to matter, let out a breath that sounded like a sob. We walked out of the courthouse into the gray drizzle of a Briarhaven afternoon. Sarah grabbed my hand, her grip tight, her knuckles rough from kneading dough. You saved us. Lily, she said. I didn't think anyone could beat them. I smiled. The professional, reassuring smile I had perfected over a decade. We are not done yet. Sarah. But today was a good day. Go home. Bake something. I watched her walk toward the parking garage, her shoulders finally dropping from their permanent hunch of defensive tension. It should have felt like a victory. I had beaten a senior partner from a top-tier firm. I had protected the vulnerable. I had done the work. But as I turned to hail a cab, the voice was there. It didn't care about the ruling. It didn't care about the law. It was a cold, baritone echo in the back of my skull. You are playing dress-up. Lily, you will never be a real lawyer. Soft law for soft people. Gordon Martinez, my father. It had been 5 years since I had spoken to him, but he still presided over the courtroom in my head, banging his gavel every time I dared to feel proud. To him, what I did wasn't law. It was hand-holding. Real law, according to Gordon, was corporate mergers, hostile takeovers, and crushing the opposition until they couldn't afford to breathe. Real law happened in boardrooms, not in county courthouses fighting for a bakery. I shook my head, physically dislodging the memory, and stepped into the taxi. To the bridge, I told the driver. Hawthorne Bridge Legal Group. The firm was my sanctuary. We were a mid-size outfit, situated in a renovated industrial loft just across the river from the glass towers where the old guard lived. We didn't have mahogany walls or oil paintings of dead founders. We had glass, steel, and a mandate to be different. When I walked onto the 3rd floor, the hum of activity was steady. Associates were on phones. Paralegals were moving with purpose. I nodded to the receptionist and headed for my office, tossing my briefcase on the couch. Nice win on the motion. A voice called out. I turned to see David, one of the commercial litigation partners. He was leaning against my doorframe, holding a coffee mug. News travels fast. I said, Court clerk texted me. David grinned. Sterling must be fuming. He hates losing to anyone, let alone who? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Let alone someone who actually reads the case law. David recovered smoothly. Arthur wants to see you. War room. Now. My stomach tightened. Arthur Penhaligon was our managing partner. He was a good man, brilliant and fair. But a summons to the war room in the middle of the afternoon usually meant a crisis. A malpractice suit, a data breach, or a client threatening to walk. I smoothed my skirt, grabbed a notepad, and walked down the hall. The war room was at the corner of the building, offering a panoramic view of the skyline and the river that cut Briarhaven in half. When I entered, the room was quiet, too quiet. Arthur sat at the head of the long table. To his right was Sarah Jenkins, our head of corporate finance, and Marcus Thorne, our ethics chair. They all looked up as I walked in. There were no smiles. "Close the door." "Lily," Arthur said. I did. The latch clicked with a sound that felt final. "Sit down," Arthur said. I took the seat opposite him. "What is wrong? Did we lose the creeping mold case?" "No," Arthur said. He folded his hands on top of a thick, spiral-bound file. "We received an inbound application this morning. It was delivered by courier. Marked strictly confidential." I relaxed slightly. "An application? You mean a lateral hire? A partner looking to jump ship?" "Not a partner." "Lily," Arthur said. "A firm." I frowned. Mergers were not my department. I handled high-stakes litigation and crisis management. "Why am I here?" "Because of who it is," Marcus said, his voice low. Arthur slid the file across the sleek white table. It stopped inches from my hand. The cover was plain gray cardstock, heavy and expensive. The label was simple: Project Phoenix, Target Acquisition, Dawson and Klein, LLP. The air left the room. I stared at the name, Dawson and Klein, the firm that built the skyline across the river, the firm that represented the banks, the insurers, the people who owned this city, the firm my father founded. I looked up at Arthur. "Is this a joke?" "They reached out to us," Arthur said. "They want to be acquired, not a merger of equals, an acquisition. They want to come under the Hawthorne banner." "Why?" I asked. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. "Hollow and distant. They are 3 times our size. They have billing rates I cannot even say out loud without laughing." "Why would they want us to buy them?" "That is the question," Sarah Jenkins said, tapping her pen on her notebook. "Their financials look interesting, but they are pushing for a fast close. 60 days. I sat back, the leather chair creaking. "I cannot be in this room." "Arthur, you know that." "We know." Arthur said. "I have a conflict," I said, my voice gaining strength. "A personal conflict so deep it probably has its own zip code. Gordon Martinez is a naming partner. He is my father. He is also the man who told me I was unfit to practice law in this city, if I am involved in this. And it goes south. He will claim bias. He will say I sabotaged it out of spite. We thought about that." Marcus said, "We discussed recusing you entirely, but," I asked, "but you are the only one who knows where the bodies are buried." Arthur said. I stared at him. "Lily," Arthur continued, his tone shifting from boss to mentor. "If we do this deal, it changes everything for us. It puts us in the major leagues overnight. But if we buy a lemon, if we inherit a disaster, it sinks us. We need to know what the culture is really like over there. We need to know if the partners are loyal or if they will cash out and run. We need to know if Gordon is looking for an exit strategy or a throne. He does not want a throne," I said automatically. "He wants a monument. See?" Arthur pointed a finger at me. That is what we need. We can look at the spreadsheets all day. Sarah can audit their accounts. But I need you to look at the people. I need you to tell me if they are lying." I looked at the file again, Dawson and Klein. It felt like a trap. It felt like a heavy iron door swinging shut behind me. "If I do this," I said, "I have conditions. Name them." Arthur said. "1," I said, "I am not the face of the deal. I do not negotiate the money. I do not promise them retention bonuses. My role is risk assessment. Strictly due diligence on liability, staff culture, and client transition." "Agreed," Arthur said. 2, I continued. "I want complete transparency. If I smell smoke, I get to look for the fire. No privileged files kept from the acquisition team. If they hide something, we walk, immediately, no sunk cost fallacies. Arthur looked at Sarah, then back at me. Agreed. And 3, I said, I want it documented that I offered to recuse myself and was asked to stay by the executive committee. I will not have my ethics questioned when this hits the legal journals. Marcus nodded. I will draft the memo myself. I took a deep breath and pulled the file toward me. It was heavy, dense with paper. When is the first meeting? I asked. Thursday. Arthur said, They are coming here. I felt a cold prickle of anticipation. Or maybe dread. Run down my spine. Does Gordon know I am a partner here? Arthur paused. Lily, your name is on the website. You have been winning cases in the papers for 3 years. He knows. I opened the file. The first page was an executive summary. It was full of buzzwords like synergy and strategic realignment, but I knew how to read between the lines of corporate speak. Synergy usually meant we are bleeding cash. Realignment usually meant we are scared. I spent the next 4 hours in the war room, ignoring my other emails. I read through the list of partners, the practice groups, the revenue charts. It all looked impressive on the surface. Revenue was up 4% year over year. Profits per partner were high. But there were gaps. Why is the turnover rate for associates 20% higher than the industry average? I asked Sarah. Burnout shop? Sarah suggested. They are old school. They probably make them bill 2,500 hours a year. Maybe, I said. But look at the support staff turnover. Paralegals, secretaries, IT. They are churning through people. That is not just hard work. That is a toxic environment. I made a note in the margin. Culture audit. By the time I left the office, it was dark. The city lights of Briarhaven reflected on the river, shimmering and distorted. I walked to my car, my head throbbing. I had spent my entire adult life building a fortress to keep Gordon Martinez out. Now, I was being asked to lower the drawbridge and let him in. I drove home in silence. My apartment was in a quiet neighborhood, far from the legal district. It was my sanctuary. I kicked off my heels and poured a glass of red wine. Standing by the window, my phone buzzed on the kitchen island. I looked at the screen. Mom, I hesitated. My mother and I had a fragile peace. She had stayed with Gordon, navigating his moods and his ego with the practiced grace of a diplomat in a war zone. She loved me. I knew that. But she loved peace more. I swiped answer. Hello? Mom, Lily, she said. Her voice was tight, high-pitched. It was her everything is fine voice, which meant absolutely nothing was fine. Is everything okay? I asked. I just wanted to hear your voice. She said, Mom, it is 9 o'clock on a Tuesday. You usually call on Sundays. What is it? She sighed. A sound of static over the line. It is your father. I took a sip of wine. What has he done now? He is acting strange. Lily, strange even for him. Strange how? He is fixated on you, she said. He has been asking questions. Who you are dating, where you are living. He even asked if you were still driving that Honda. I upgraded to the Audi 2 years ago. I said, he knows that. He is nervous. Lily, I have not seen him this nervous since the '98 crash. He is pacing the house at night. He is on the phone in the study at 3 a.m. with the door locked. I felt a chill. Did he say anything about the firm? No. She said, that is the thing. He usually complains about the incompetence of his partners constantly. For the last month? Silence. He just sits there, staring at the wall, like he is rehearsing a speech, like he is waiting for a jury to come back with a verdict. I gripped the phone tighter. Mom, listen to me. Has he mentioned Hawthorne Bridge? Your firm? She paused. I do not think so. Why? Nothing. I lied. Just curious. Lily, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Be careful. If he is planning something involving you, it is not because he has had a change of heart. He does not apologize. He strategizes. I know. Mom, I know. We said our goodbyes, and I hung up. The apartment felt too big, too empty. I sat down at my laptop to check my personal email. Buried in the spam folder was a message that had arrived an hour ago. The subject line was blank. I opened it. The sender was b_vance@dklaw.com. Beatrice Vance. I remembered her. She was a junior partner at Dawson and Klein, a brilliant tax attorney who Gordon used to parade around as proof that the firm was modern, even though he talked over her in every meeting. The body of the email was short. Lily, I know you are on the diligence team. I saw the list. We need to meet. Not at the offices. Somewhere quiet. If you think this is about money, you do not understand what is happening. This isn't a merger. It is a lifeboat. Woman to woman. Please. Beatrice. I stared at the screen. A lifeboat. That implies the ship is sinking. But according to the financials I had just reviewed, the ship was made of solid gold. I didn't reply. Not yet. I needed to see them first. I needed to look them in the eye. Thursday morning arrived with a vengeance. The sky was a bruised purple, threatening a storm that wouldn't break. I dressed with the precision of a soldier putting on armor. Navy suit, sharp tailoring, silk blouse, no jewelry except my watch. I arrived at the office at 7. The conference room was already set up, water bottles aligned, notepads perfectly square. At 9 sharp, the elevator doors opened. Arthur and Marcus went to greet them. I stood back, near the window, watching. Gordon Martinez walked out first. He was smaller than I remembered, or maybe I was just bigger. He wore a charcoal 3-piece suit, the fabric impeccable. His hair was silver now. Not the pepper and salt I grew up with, but his eyes were the same. Dark, assessing, devoid of warmth. He shook Arthur's hand firmly. Arthur, he said, good of you to host us. Gordon, Arthur said. Behind Gordon came 3 others. Beatrice Vance, looking pale and clutching her briefcase like a shield. Elias Thorne, the head of litigation, a man who looked like he had slept in his suit, and a younger man I didn't recognize, holding a tablet. They moved into the conference room. I waited until they were seated before I approached the table. Gordon was laughing at something Arthur said. That practiced, clubroom chuckle that made everyone feel like an insider. Then he saw me. The laugh didn't stop, but it changed. It became drier. And this must be the diligence lead, he said. He didn't say my daughter. He didn't say Lily. Hello? Gordon. I said. I didn't smile. I didn't extend a hand. I pulled out the chair directly across from him and sat down. He looked at me for a long second. I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Surprise? Irritation? Before the mask slammed back down. Counsel, he said, nodding his head. The word hung in the air. Counsel. It was a professional courtesy. But coming from him, it sounded like a demotion. It was a way of putting me in a box. You are not family. You are the opposition. Let us begin, Arthur said. Sensing the temperature drop, the presentation was slick. The young man with the tablet projected charts onto the wall. They talked about market share. They talked about the combined power of our litigation departments. They talked about cost-saving synergies in back-office operations. I let them talk for 20 minutes. I took notes. I watched Beatrice Vance. She was staring at her hands, twisting a gold ring on her finger. She looked terrified. When the presentation ended, the room was silent. Impressive numbers, Sarah Jenkins said. Gordon leaned back, looking satisfied. We run a tight ship. We believe that with Hawthorne's modern platform and our client base, we could dominate the state within 5 years. I leaned forward. Gordon, I said. He looked at me. Yes? I have been reviewing your organizational charts. I said, you have listed your practice groups here. Corporate, tax, real estate, IP, general litigation. That is correct, Gordon said. Where is employment defense? I asked. The room went still. Elias Thorne shifted in his seat. Gordon didn't blink. We folded that into general litigation last year. It was an efficiency move. Efficiency move, I repeated. But looking at the court filings for Briarhaven County, Your firm has appeared in 45 employment cases in the last 18 months. That is a heavy volume for a generalist group. Who is leading those cases? We have a team, Elias said quickly. Senior associates mostly. So you have senior associates handling complex discrimination and wrongful termination suits without a dedicated partner supervising? I asked. That seems risky for a firm of your reputation. We manage the risk, Gordon said, his voice hardening. I turned the page of my notebook. Let us talk about clients. You listed your top 10 revenue generators. We did. Gordon said. Where is Armitage Aeronautics? I asked. This time, the reaction was visible. The young man with the tablet dropped his stylus. It clattered loudly on the glass table. Armitage Aeronautics was the crown jewel of Briarhaven industry, defense contracts, government grants, billions in revenue. Dawson and Klein had represented them for 20 years. We are transitioning that relationship, Gordon said. Transitioning? I asked. That is a vague word. Gordon. Are they firing you? Did you fire them? Is there a conflict? It is a mutual parting of ways, Gordon said smoothly. They are moving their headquarters to Texas. They want local counsel. It is amicable. Amicable, I said. So if I call their general counsel today for a reference, they will have glowing things to say? Gordon's eyes narrowed. They are a former client. Lily, we have strict confidentiality agreements regarding our separation. I would advise against poking that bear. I am not poking a bear. I said, I am doing diligence on an acquisition that will cost my partners millions of dollars. If your biggest client is walking away, that affects the valuation of your firm by at least 15%. We have priced that in, Beatrice said. Her voice was shaky. The valuation model accounts for the attrition. I looked at Beatrice. She met my eyes for a split second, then looked away. Woman to woman, I looked back at the financials. These summary sheets, I said. They are very pretty, but they are summaries. Where are the detailed ledgers? Where is the breakdown of the partnership draws? We will provide those in the next stage. Gordon said dismissively, once we have a letter of intent. No, I said. Gordon stopped. Excuse me? No letter of intent. I said, we do not sign anything until I see the raw data. I want to see the trust account audits. I want to see the malpractice carrier's loss runs for the last 5 years. And I want to see the full correspondence file regarding the Armitage exit. That is highly irregular. Elias blustered. Those are sensitive documents. We are talking about buying you. Elias, I said, we are going to own your sensitivity. If you want us to write a check, you open the books, all of them. Gordon stared at me. His face was perfectly still, but his jaw muscle was twitching. You have become very aggressive. Counsel, he said softly. I learned from the best. I said. Arthur cleared his throat. I agree with Lily. We need full disclosure before we move to an LOI. Gordon looked around the room. He saw Arthur's resolve. He saw Marcus taking notes. He realized he was not in his own boardroom anymore. He didn't have the gavel. Very well, Gordon said. Standing up, we will have the data room opened for you by Monday. But I expect strict confidentiality. If word gets out that we are showing you our books, we know the drill. Gordon, I said. He looked at me one last time. There was no pride in his eyes. There was something else, something I had never seen in Gordon Martinez. Fear. He nodded to his team, and they filed out. When the door closed, the room let out a collective breath. Jesus, Sarah Jenkins said, you were not kidding about the tension. He is hiding something. I said, obviously. Arthur said, but what? The Armitage thing is huge. If they lost Armitage, they are desperate for revenue. It is not just revenue, I said. I stood up and walked to the window. Watching the gray figures of my father and his partners walking toward their town car in the parking lot below. They lied about the employment group. I said, you do not fold a busy practice group into general lit for efficiency. You do it to bury something, to scatter the files so no one sees the pattern. And the Armitage exit? Marcus asked. They are not moving to Texas. I said, I read the business section. Armitage just broke ground on a new research facility 10 miles north of here. They aren't leaving the state. They are leaving the firm. Why lie about it? Arthur asked. Because, I turned back to them. You don't apply to be acquired by a smaller firm because you are losing money. You can get a line of credit for that. You apply to be acquired because you need a shield. A shield against what? Sarah asked. I looked at the empty chair where my father had sat. They aren't applying from a position of weakness, I said. They are applying because someone is about to force them into court. They think if they hide inside our firm, if they mix their liabilities with our insurance and our reputation, they will survive the blast. Arthur frowned. What blast? I don't know yet, I said, but I'm going to find out. I looked down at the file on the table. The gray cover looked like a tombstone. Part 1 ended with a realization that settled in my stomach like cold lead. My father wasn't here to make amends. He wasn't here to respect me. He was here because he had set a fire, and he wanted to use my house to hide from the smoke. I picked up my phone and typed a message to Beatrice Vance. Meet me, tonight, 10 o'clock. I hit send. The game had started. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the daughter looking for approval. I was the prosecutor looking for the truth. And I wasn't going to stop until I had it. The virtual data room was a digital graveyard. It was supposed to be the nervous system of Dawson and Klein, the repository of every contract, lease, and ledger that defined their existence. Instead, it was a landscape of blank spaces and black bars. I sat in my office at Hawthorne Bridge, the glow of 2 monitors illuminating the frustration on my face. It had been 4 days since the meeting. 4 days since Gordon promised full transparency. I clicked on a file labeled Malpractice History, 5-year summary. The document opened. It was 3 pages long. For a firm of their size, with 50 lawyers and high-stakes corporate liability, 3 pages was impossible. It should have been 50, and every significant settlement figure was redacted. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for the Dawson and Klein diligence coordinator. A junior partner named Simon. He answered on the first ring. Lily. Good morning. Good morning. Simon, I said, keeping my voice pleasant but firm. I am looking at folder 4B. The litigation history. It seems to be missing the exhibits, and the settlement amounts are blacked out. Ah, yes, Simon said, his voice smooth. Practiced. We are waiting on privacy waivers from those claimants. Standard procedure. You know how it is. I don't know how it is. Simon, I said, we signed a non-disclosure agreement that is tighter than a drum. There is no privacy concern between counsel and an acquisition. I need to know if you settled a claim for $10,000 or $10 million. That changes our risk profile. I will see what I can do. He said, do not see what you can do. Simon, upload the unredacted files by noon, or I send a memo to my executive committee recommending we pause the talks. There was a silence on the line, a beat too long. I will talk to the committee, he said, his tone cooling. He hung up. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. They were stalling. It was the oldest trick in the litigation handbook. Delay, obfuscate, and hope the other side gets tired or desperate enough to sign without looking. But we weren't desperate. They were. I needed to get off the screen and on the ground. Arthur had authorized me to conduct limited staff interviews, ostensibly to assess cultural fit. It was a polite way of saying I could talk to the grunts to see if they were happy. But I wasn't looking for happiness. I was looking for fear. I met with the first interviewee in a neutral conference room at a hotel halfway between our offices. Her name was Elena, a mid-level paralegal who had been with Dawson and Klein for 8 years. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Thank you for meeting me. Elena, I said, pushing a glass of water toward her. This is entirely confidential. Your partners will not know what we discuss. She nodded, gripping her purse in her lap. They said this is a merger, that we are joining forces. That is the plan. I said, I just want to know about your day-to-day. How is the workload? How is the morale? She laughed. A sharp, brittle sound. Morale? There is no morale. Tell me, I said softly. People are leaving, she said. The good ones. The ones who have been there for decades. It started 6 months ago. First it was just whispers. Then partners started closing their doors. We used to have an open door policy. Now, if you knock on a partner's door, they look at you like you are the police. What changed? I asked. I don't know, she said. But the shouting, you can hear it through the walls. Gordon and Elias get into it almost every day. And the policy on files changed. Changed how? We used to scan everything, she said. Digital backups for everything, 2 months ago. A memo came down from the executive committee. Hard copies only for sensitive client matters, and we were told not to put anything in email. If we had a question about a case, we had to go ask in person. No paper trail. That was the exact phrase Beatrice used. I wrote that down. No paper trail. In the year 2026, a law firm moving back to paper was not a stylistic choice. It was an evidence suppression strategy. Is there anything else? I asked. Elena looked at the door, as if checking for listeners. 2 weeks ago. I was working late. I saw the CFO shredding documents. Not his secretary. Him. He was standing at the shredder at 9 o'clock at night, feeding stacks of paper into the machine. When he saw me, he told me to go home. He looked terrified. I thanked her and let her go. The pattern repeated itself with the next 3 interviews. A receptionist who mentioned that the courier service bills had tripled because they stopped emailing documents. A billing coordinator who said the partners were demanding cash retainers from new clients, which was highly irregular for corporate defense work. But the real break came from Julian. Julian was a senior associate, the kind of guy who lived for the law. Ivy League, law review, on the partnership track. I knew him by reputation. He was sharp, ethical, and tired. We met at a dive bar on the edge of the city, a place where lawyers rarely went. He was drinking a club soda. Lily, he said, shaking my hand, it is weird seeing you on the other side of this. It is weird being here. Julian, I admitted, I am going to leave, he said bluntly. Whether this deal goes through or not, I have an offer from a firm in Chicago. Why? I asked. Because I don't want to lose my license, he said. I leaned in. Talk to me. Julian, he looked down at his glass. A month ago, on a Saturday, I got a call from Elias Thorne. He told me to come in. He said it was an emergency file review. When I got there, it wasn't a review. It was a packing party. Packing? Boxes, Julian said. Dozens of them. We were told to pull specific files, not the active ones, closed cases, old matters, specifically regarding 3 clients. Which clients? He shook his head. I can't say. Privilege. But here's the thing. We weren't archiving them. We weren't sending them to the off-site storage facility we have used for 20 years. Where did they go? I asked. Julian lowered his voice. Elias gave me an address. He told me to load the boxes into my trunk and drive them there. He said the storage facility was full and this was a temporary secure location. I held my breath. What was the address? It was a residential address. Julian said, a large estate out in the hills. I looked it up later. It is owned by a shell company, but the tax bills go to a P.O. box registered to Gordon Martinez. I felt a cold sensation wash over me. My father was moving client files to a private residence. That was a catastrophic breach of chain of custody. If those files were subpoenaed, he could claim they were lost, or worse, he could destroy them without a record of their destruction. Did you take them? I asked. Julian looked me in the eye. I drove them there. I unloaded them into a garage. Gordon was there. He was wearing a tracksuit. He thanked me and gave me a bottle of scotch. He told me I was a team player. And then I went home and updated my resume. Julian said, Lily, whatever they are hiding in those boxes, it is radioactive. Do not let your firm touch it. I walked out of the bar into the night air, feeling dirty. It wasn't just incompetence anymore. It was conspiracy. The next day, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't save, but I knew. Coffee, the roasting plant on 4th, 2 p.m., Dad. He signed it, Dad. He hadn't called himself that in years. I considered ignoring it, but I needed to see his face. I needed to see if he could look me in the eye and lie about the boxes. The cafe was industrial and loud, filled with the smell of roasting beans. It was neutral ground. Gordon was sitting at a corner table, nursing a black coffee. He looked tired. The crispness of his suit couldn't hide the gray pallor of his skin. "Lily," he said, half standing as I approached. "Sit down." "Gordon," I said. He winced slightly at the name but sat. "I got you a latte." "Oat milk. You still drink that?" "I do," I said, sitting down. But I didn't touch the cup. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "This process. It is grueling. I remember when we acquired the Roth firm in '92. I didn't sleep for a month. I am fine." I said, "The process is thorough. That is the point." He smiled, a sad, weary expression. "You are thorough. You always were. Even when you were a kid, organizing your crayons by color gradient. You got that from your mother." I didn't smile back. "I got my work ethic from you." I said, "And my stubbornness." He chuckled. "True, very true." He leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "Lily, I know things have been difficult between us. I was hard on you. I know that. I wanted you to be tough. This world, this profession, it eats the weak. I didn't want you to be eaten, so you tried to eat me first?" I asked, "to build up my immunity?" He looked away. "I made mistakes. I am an old man. Lily, I look at my legacy, and I see a lot of billable hours and a lot of empty rooms." I waited. "This was the setup. This merger," he said, turning his eyes back to me. "It is not just business. It is a chance to make things right, to bring you back into the fold. You would be a senior partner. You would eventually run the place. We could build something together. A dynasty. A dynasty." I repeated. "Yes," he said, his eyes lighting up with a desperate intensity. "The Martinez name. United. It would be powerful. It could be our fresh start." I looked at him. Really looked at him. I saw the fear behind the bluster. He wasn't offering me a kingdom. He was looking for a scapegoat. Or a savior. And he didn't care which one I became as long as he survived. A fresh start requires the truth. "Gordon," I said, my voice low and controlled. His smile faltered. "I am being truthful." "No," I said, "you are redacting settlement figures. You are shredding documents, and you are moving boxes of client files to a private garage in the middle of the night." The color drained from his face. "Who told you that?" "It doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is that I know. You are hiding evidence. Gordon, that is not a fresh start. That is obstruction of justice," he hissed, leaning in close. "You do not know what you are talking about. Those were personal papers. They were client files." I said, "Julian told me." He slammed his hand on the table. "Julian is a liar and a weakling." People turned to look. Gordon froze, realizing he had lost control. He smoothed his tie, his breathing heavy. "You are dangerous, Lily," he whispered. "You are letting your resentment cloud your judgment. You are going to blow up a deal that could make you rich because you are still mad that I didn't come to your law school graduation." I stood up. "I am not mad. Gordon, I am indifferent, and I am not going to let you burn down my firm to save your own skin." I walked away. I didn't look back, but I could feel his eyes boring into my spine. Back at Hawthorne Bridge, the atmosphere was manic. The partners smelled blood in the water. Not the danger I saw, but the opportunity. Arthur pulled me into his office. "Lily, good news. I just got off the phone with the bank. They are willing to finance the acquisition at a prime rate. They love the asset list. The assets are inflated." "Arthur," I said, pacing the room. "We went over this," he said, impatient. "Every firm pads the numbers a little." "This isn't padding," I said. I told him about the interviews, the shredding, the culture of fear. He waved a hand. "Mergers are stressful. People get paranoid. It is hearsay." "Lily, what about the files?" I asked. "I have a witness who says Gordon is moving files off-site." Did you see the files? Arthur asked. No. But then it is a rumor, he said. Listen to me. We have 2 other firms sniffing around Dawson and Klein. If we don't move fast, we lose this. This deal puts us in the Fortune 500 representation. It brings us the prestige we have been chasing for 10 years. I looked at Arthur. He was a good lawyer, but he was blinded by the shiny object. I need more time. I said, We don't have time, he snapped. We are scheduling the partnership vote for next Friday. I walked out of his office feeling like I was the only person on the Titanic pointing at the iceberg, while everyone else was debating the dinner menu. I went back to my desk and dug into the insurance policies. If the people wouldn't talk, maybe the contracts would. I pulled up the professional liability coverage for Dawson and Klein. For 10 years, they had been with the same carrier, paying a steady premium. Then, 3 months ago, everything changed. They had switched carriers. The new policy was with a high-risk insurer, the kind that insures doctors with too many malpractice suits. The premium was triple what they had been paying, but the kicker was the coverage limits. They had purchased an excess liability tower of $50 million. You don't buy $50 million of extra insurance coverage because you are feeling cautious. You buy it because you know something is coming that is going to cost more than your standard policy limit. They are expecting a nuclear bomb. I whispered to myself. I printed the policy change and pinned it to my wall. It was the first piece of hard evidence. Then came the second signal. My phone rang. It was David, my litigation partner. Have you heard? He asked. Heard what? Sterling and Lockwood just hired 3 of Dawson's mid-level partners. Corporate guys. They gave them signing bonuses that are unheard of. They are poaching. I said, They are evacuating. David corrected. Sterling knows something. They are stripping the assets, the talent, before the hull breaches. This confirms it. I said, David, we have to stop this vote. Lily, David said, his voice dropping, you need to be careful. What do you mean? I was in the break room. I heard Arthur talking to Sarah. They think you are spiraling. Spiraling? They think you are letting your history with your father dictate your diligence. They think you are looking for problems because you want to punish him. If you go into that vote waving your arms and screaming about conspiracies without hard proof, they are going to vote you down, and you will lose your standing here. I felt a sharp sting of betrayal. I had built this firm with them. I had billed thousands of hours, brought in clients, trained associates, and because my last name was Martinez, I was suddenly the hysterical daughter. Okay, I said, my voice turning to ice. Thank you for telling me. I hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at the rain streaking the window. I felt a profound grief for the girl I used to be, the one who studied until her eyes burned, hoping that if she just got one more A, one more clerkship, her father would finally look at her with respect. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who realized that respect was a currency her father didn't possess. If they wanted cold, I would give them cold. I wiped the emotion from my face. I organized my files. I drafted a memo that was clinical, precise, and devoid of adjectives. I listed the insurance change. I listed the partner departures. I listed the inconsistencies in the revenue recognition. I was working late, the office dark around me, when the mail cart rattled by. The clerk dropped a stack of envelopes on my desk. Most were invoices or court notices, but one was a plain manila envelope, no return address, just my name, handwritten in block letters. I opened it. Inside were photocopies. They were grainy, but legible. They were pages from a calendar. Gordon's private calendar. I scanned the dates. They were from 2 years ago. Dinner, J.C., the Pierre Hotel. Meeting, J.C., private hangar. Drinks, J.C., 11 p.m. I frowned. Who was J.C.? I flipped to the next page. It was an expense report. Gordon had expensed a flight to the Cayman Islands. The guest listed was Jonathan Carver. My breath hitched. Jonathan Carver was the CEO of Armitage Aeronautics. But the dates. I checked the timeline. 2 years ago. Armitage was in the middle of a massive government investigation regarding faulty thruster components. Dawson and Klein was representing them. If Gordon was meeting privately with the CEO, off the record, in hotels and private hangars, during an active federal investigation, that was a conflict of interest. If they were coordinating stories without the other lawyers present, it was witness tampering. And if Gordon was expensing it, he was arrogant enough to leave a paper trail. I looked at the last page in the envelope. It was a single handwritten note, scribbled on Dawson and Klein letterhead. Fix it, whatever it costs. Just make the problem go away. It was Gordon's handwriting. I sat back, my heart hammering against my ribs. This wasn't just malpractice. This was a cover-up. Gordon had helped Jonathan Carver bury something, likely the evidence of the faulty thrusters, and now, 2 years later, it was unearthing itself. That was why Armitage was leaving. That was why the files were moving. That was why the insurance was spiked. Gordon wasn't trying to sell a law firm. He was trying to sell a crime scene. He wanted Hawthorne Bridge to acquire Dawson and Klein so that when the indictment came down, or the massive class action lawsuit hit, the liability would be spread across our partnership. He was going to use my firm's clean reputation to dilute his own toxicity. He was going to sacrifice me to save his legacy. I put the papers back in the envelope and locked it in my drawer. I had the proof, but I couldn't just show it to Arthur. If I showed it now, Gordon would claim it was forged. He would claim I was framed. I needed to verify it. I needed to find the body that went with this smoking gun. Part 2 ended with the silence of my office pressing in on me. The city lights outside looked like distant fires. I was no longer just a lawyer doing due diligence. I was the only thing standing between my firm and total destruction, and the man holding the match was the one who gave me life. I turned off my monitor, the black screen reflecting a face that looked harder, older, and ready for war. The conference room at Hawthorne Bridge had become my second home, a glass-walled cage where I dissected the corpse of my father's legacy piece by piece. The air conditioning hummed a low, monotonous note, the only sound accompanying the scratching of my pen against paper. I was hunting for ghosts. Specifically, I was hunting for the Employment Defense Practice Group. In every organizational chart from 2 years ago, it was a robust column, generating 15% of the firm's revenue. In the current documents, it had vanished, absorbed into the nebulous blob of general litigation. I requested the case files for that specific unit 3 times. 3 times. I was sent corrupted zip files or links that expired within an hour. I walked down the hall to Arthur's office. He was on the phone, looking out the window at the skyline, already imagining his name on a bigger building. He waved me in. "They are stonewalling on the employment files," I said as soon as he hung up. Arthur sighed, rubbing his face. "Lily, they are merging systems. Technical glitches happen. This is not a glitch. Arthur, it is a quarantine." I slapped a folder on his desk. I pulled the public docket records for Briarhaven Superior Court. In the last 18 months, Dawson and Klein has settled 23 employment discrimination cases. "Is that high?" Arthur asked, picking up the sheet. "It is astronomical," I said. "But look at the timing. They are settling before discovery. Before a single deposition is taken, they are paying out 6 figures to make these cases go away immediately. That is just aggressive risk management," Arthur argued, avoiding the cost of trial. "No," I said. "You avoid trial when the cost of litigation outweighs the settlement. You avoid discovery when the truth is expensive. They are terrified of what these plaintiffs will find in their emails." Arthur looked at the list. He was starting to see it, but he didn't want to. He wanted the deal. Just get the files. "Lily, push harder." I did more than push. I bypassed the data room entirely. I set up a lunch with Elias Thorne. He was the head of litigation at Dawson and Klein, a man who wore cufflinks the size of quarters and smiled like a shark in a heavily chlorinated pool. We met at a steakhouse that smelled of old money and cigar smoke. "Lily," Elias said, pouring sparkling water into my glass, "you are looking tired. This process is a grinder, isn't it?" "I am fine." "Elias," I said, I am just trying to understand why your firm seems allergic to its own history. He laughed, a rich baritone sound that didn't reach his eyes. We are focused on the future. That is why we are here. Speaking of the future, Gordon and I were talking this morning. Oh, I said, cutting into my steak. We are impressed. Lily, truly, you have a razor-sharp mind. Gordon says you remind him of himself at your age, though I think you have better bedside manner. I put my fork down. What is the pitch? Elias? No pitch, he said, leaning in. A proposal. When this combination closes, we are going to need strong leadership to bridge the two cultures. Gordon is thinking of stepping up to chairman emeritus. Semi-retirement. We need a managing partner for the new entity. I stared at him. We think it should be you, Elias said softly. You and me. Co-managing partners. You have the trust of your people. I have the trust of the old guard. We could run this city. Lily. I looked at the man offering me the crown. It was a beautiful lie. They didn't want me to lead. They wanted me implicated. If I was a founding partner of the new firm, I would be liable for everything that came with it. I wouldn't be the investigator anymore. I would be the accomplice. I appreciate the offer. Elias, I said, keeping my voice flat, but I'm not looking for a promotion. I am looking for the employment files. Elias's smile vanished. It was like watching a light bulb burn out. You are fixating on the wrong things. Lily. You are missing the forest for the rotting trees. If the trees are rotting, Elias, I need to know why before I build a house in the branches. He signaled for the check, his charm replaced by a cold, bureaucratic indifference. You will get your files, but be careful what you dig for. You might not like the smell. He was right about the smell. That afternoon, the files arrived. They were heavily redacted, but the pattern was undeniable. Sexual harassment claims against senior rainmakers, age discrimination suits from pushed-out partners, and in every single case, the settlement agreement included a draconian non-disclosure clause and a stipulation that the plaintiff return all firm documents. They were scrubbing the decks. I needed to talk to someone who wasn't bound by a golden parachute. I needed a grunt. I spent 2 hours on LinkedIn. Cross-referencing former employees, I found him. Kevin Miller. He had been a paralegal in the employment group for 5 years before leaving abruptly 6 months ago. He was now working at a non-profit housing clinic. Making a fraction of his old salary, I met him on a bench in City Park. He was eating a sandwich wrapped in foil, watching pigeons fight over crumbs. He looked younger than 30, but his eyes were old. I am not talking about specific cases, Kevin said without looking at me. I signed an NDA. They told me if I breached it, they would sue me into bankruptcy. I am not asking for names. Kevin, I said, sitting on the other end of the bench, I am asking about the process. The culture. He chewed slowly. The culture was containment. That was the word Elias used. Contain the blast. What blast? I asked. Kevin wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. It wasn't one thing. It was everything. The partners. They stopped acting like lawyers and started acting like fixers. We weren't defending clients. We were burying their mistakes. And then we started burying our own. Did Gordon know? I asked. The question felt heavy in my mouth. Kevin looked at me then. He knew who I was. Your dad, he said. He didn't start the fires. He wasn't the one harassing the associates or embezzling the trust funds, but he was the one who bought the fire extinguishers. He paused, searching for the words. There was a meeting. Kevin said, about a year ago, a client had a major compliance issue. Illegal dumping of toxic waste. The EPA was sniffing around. The partner in charge wanted to report it, to get ahead of it. Gordon walked in. I was taking notes. Gordon took the notepad out of my hands and threw it in the trash. He looked at the partner and said, We are not confessors. We are defenders. Make it go away. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. Your dad didn't start it, Kevin said, standing up to leave. But he decided not to stop it. And once you decide that, you are just as guilty as the guy pouring the poison. I watched him walk away. The sentence hung in the air. he decided not to stop it. That evening, I drove to my parents' house. It was a sprawling colonial in the wealthy suburbs, the kind of house that looked perfect on a Christmas card and felt like a museum on the inside. My mother was in the garden, pruning roses with a violence that suggested she was imagining they were people. "Lily," she said. "Surprised? You didn't call. I needed to see you." I said. She looked at my face and saw the storm brewing. She put down her shears. "Come inside. I will make tea." We sat in the kitchen. The silence was thick. "Mom," I said, "why did Dad really push me away?" She looked into her teacup. "He didn't push you away, Lily. He has high standards. Stop it." I said, "Stop the script. I am 33 years old. I am a partner at a law firm that is about to buy his life's work. I need the truth. Why did he tell people I wasn't cut out for this? Why did he sabotage me?" She sighed, a long, shuddering breath. "He was afraid," she whispered. "Afraid of what? That I would fail?" "No," she said, looking up, her eyes wet. "That you would see." "See what?" "See him," she said. "Really see him. You have always been moral." "Lily," rigidly so, even as a child. If someone broke a rule, you wanted justice. Gordon operates in the gray. He always has. He knew if you were close to him, if you worked in his firm, you would judge him. You would see the compromises he made to buy this house, to buy that car. "So he froze me out?" I asked. "To hide his sins?" "He did more than that," she said, her voice trembling. "When you were starting out, after that first stumble with the bar exam, he used it. Used it how?" "He told people you were fragile," she said. "He told his partners, his clients. He said you were unstable, that you had episodes. He painted a picture of a brilliant but broken girl who needed to be kept at a distance for her own safety." I felt like I had been punched in the chest. "He told them I was crazy?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "He told them you were delicate," she corrected. It was his way of explaining why his daughter wasn't at his firm without admitting he didn't want you there. It made him look like a protective father, and it kept you far enough away that you would never see the books. I stood up. The kitchen was suddenly too small. The air was too thin. He sacrificed my reputation to protect his secrets. I said, "He thought he was protecting you." She pleaded. "From the corruption? From the guilt?" "No." "Mom," I said, walking to the door. "He was protecting himself. He didn't want a witness." I drove back to the city in a haze of red-hot anger. All those years I thought I wasn't good enough. All those years I thought I had failed him. It was a lie. He had crippled me socially to keep me from realizing he was the one with the broken legs. I went straight to the office. It was midnight. The cleaning crew was vacuuming the hallway. I went to the finance department. Sarah Jenkins was still there, fueled by caffeine and deadline panic. "Lily," she said, looking up from a spread of spreadsheets. "You need to see this." "What is it?" I asked, dropping my bag, the receivables. Sarah said, "I ran a reconciliation against their bank deposits. The numbers don't match." "Show me," I said. Sarah pointed to a line item. "Here, they booked a $3 million payment from a client named Vanguard Holdings in December. It is listed as revenue. It boosted their end-of-year numbers significantly." "And?" "The money never hit the bank," Sarah said. "There is no deposit record. And when I ran a check on Vanguard Holdings, it is a shell company registered in Delaware 3 days before the invoice was sent. Phantom revenue." I said, "They are pumping air into the tires," Sarah said, trying to make the firm look solvent enough to survive the audit. "Lily, this is fraud. Straight-up accounting fraud. Print it," I said. "All of it." The next morning, the negotiation team met in the main conference room. The atmosphere was toxic. Gordon wasn't there. He had sent Elias and Beatrice. Arthur sat next to me, looking nervous. "We need to discuss the integration plan," Elias said, trying to project confidence. "Specifically, the compliance structure. We believe the current Dawson and Klein General Counsel should remain in place to oversee the transition." I laughed. It was a sharp, involuntary sound. Absolutely not, I said. Elias stiffened. Excuse me? Your general counsel has presided over a system that shreds documents and invents revenue. I said. I laid the spreadsheet on the table. We found the Vanguard Holdings entry. Elias. Do you want to explain why you are booking $3 million from a company that doesn't exist? The room went deathly silent. Beatrice looked like she was going to be sick. Elias turned a shade of gray that matched his suit. That is a complex accounting matter. Elias stammered. It is a future receivable backed by a promissory note. It is fraud, I said, and it ends today. I looked at Arthur. We have a new condition. I said, if this deal proceeds, and that is a massive if, we appoint an independent ethics monitor, a third-party auditor with full subpoena power to review every file, every email, and every bank transaction from the last 5 years. They report directly to the state bar. Elias stood up. That is outrageous. You are treating us like criminals. If the shoe fits... Elias. I said, we cannot agree to that. Beatrice whispered. Her voice was terrified. We have client confidentiality obligations. The monitor will be bound by privilege. I said, but they will see everything. If you have nothing to hide, it shouldn't be a problem. They looked at each other. I saw the panic. It wasn't just fear of embarrassment. It was fear of prison. We will have to take this back to the partnership, Elias said, gathering his papers with trembling hands. You do that, I said. As they scrambled out of the room, Arthur turned to me. Lily, you just nuked the deal. No, Arthur, I said. I just turned on the lights. I went back to my office. I had them on the ropes. But I still didn't have the knockout blow. I knew about the fraud, the culture, the missing client, but I needed the connection to Armitage. I logged into the data room one last time. I stopped looking at the folders they had created and started looking at the metadata. The trash bin. I found a file labeled temp_hold_arrow. It had been deleted, but the system had created a ghost copy in the cache. I opened it. It wasn't a letter of intent. It wasn't a transition plan. It was a scanned PDF of a letter on heavy bond paper. The header read, United States Department of Justice. Beneath that was a letter from Armitage Aeronautics Legal Department. Addressed to Gordon Martinez, R.E., Preservation Notice / Pending Litigation. Dear Mr. Martinez, this letter serves as formal notice that Armitage Aeronautics anticipates commencing litigation against Dawson and Klein LLP regarding professional negligence, breach of fiduciary duty, and obstruction of justice in relation to the federal investigation of the Model 88 thruster assembly. You are hereby instructed to preserve all documents, communications, and electronic data. I sat back, the breath leaving my lungs. It wasn't just a civil suit. The DOJ was involved. Armitage was being investigated for the faulty thrusters, and they were turning on their lawyers. They were going to claim that Dawson and Klein had advised them to break the law. And if we acquired Dawson and Klein? I grabbed a legal pad and sketched it out. Successor liability, in a merger. The new firm steps into the shoes of the old one. We wouldn't just be buying their desks and their client list. We would be buying their guilt. If we signed the deal, Hawthorne Bridge would become the defendant. The DOJ wouldn't go after the empty shell of Dawson and Klein. They would come after us. Our insurance would be drained. Our assets would be frozen. My partners, Sarah, David, Arthur, would lose everything. Gordon wasn't just looking for a lifeboat. He was strapping a bomb to my chest and handing me the detonator. I printed the document. I needed to end this. I walked out of the building. I knew where Gordon would be. He always went to the same private club on Fridays at 4 o'clock to drink scotch and pretend he was master of the universe. I walked past the doorman who tried to stop me. I walked into the mahogany-paneled lounge. Gordon was sitting in a leather armchair by the fire, holding a crystal tumbler. He looked small, old. Lily, he said, not standing up. You are making a scene. I walked up to his chair and dropped the preservation notice on the small table next to his drink. It is over. Gordon, I said. He looked at the paper. He didn't flinch. He just closed his eyes for a second. "You found it," he said softly. "I found everything." I said, "The phantom revenue, the employment settlements, the shredding. But this is the end. You are being sued by Armitage. And the feds are watching." He took a sip of scotch. "It was a matter of interpretation. We gave them the best advice we could. They ignored it. Now they need a scapegoat." "So you decided to make us the scapegoat?" I asked, my voice rising. "You were going to let my firm absorb this? You were going to let Arthur and Sarah lose their homes to pay for your malpractice? It wouldn't have come to that," he said, looking at me with those cold, calculating eyes. "Your firm is clean. You have good insurance. We could have settled it, buried it in the merger costs. You are delusional," I said, "or you are evil. I haven't decided which." He stood up then, his face flushing red. "I did what I had to do to survive," he snapped. "Do you think building a firm is a tea party? It is war. Lily, every day is war. I protected my people. You protected yourself," I shouted back. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "Don't you dare judge me. You sit there in your boutique firm with your moral high ground because you have never had to make the hard choice. You have never had to decide between ethics and survival. I have made that choice every day." I said, "And I chose ethics. That is why I am a real lawyer, and you are just a fixer in a suit." He grabbed my arm. His grip was weak, shaking. "Don't humiliate me." "Lily," he pleaded. The anger was gone, replaced by naked terror. "If you release this, if you blow this up, I have nothing. My legacy is dust. Please, just let the deal go through. We can manage the Armitage claim together. I will help you." I looked at his hand on my arm, the hand that had signed my report cards, the hand that had signed the checks to keep me away. I pulled my arm free. "You did that work for years, Gordon," I said, my voice steady, final. "You built this trap. I am just refusing to step into it." I walked away. "Lily!" he called after me. "Lily, come back." I kept walking. I reached the street and took a deep breath of the cool evening air. I had the truth. I had the evidence. But as I walked back toward Hawthorne Bridge, the realization hit me. I knew the plan. I knew the trap. Gordon intended to merge fast. Once the papers were signed, Dawson and Klein would cease to exist as a legal entity. The preservation notice, the DOJ investigation, the fraud, it would all transfer to Hawthorne Bridge under the doctrine of successor liability. He would retire. He would take his payout and go to the Caymans. And when the subpoena arrived, it would have my name on it. I stopped on the corner, watching the traffic rush by. He wasn't just trying to save his firm. He was trying to frame me. He was willing to let his own daughter go down for his crimes, proving once and for all that I was the unstable one who couldn't handle the pressure. Part 3 ended with me standing on the sidewalk, holding the evidence of my father's betrayal. I wasn't just fighting for a deal anymore. I was fighting for my life, and I was done playing defense. Saturday morning was supposed to be quiet. It was supposed to be the day the air conditioning in the building cycled down to a low hum and the phone stopped ringing. But inside the small conference room on the 4th floor of Hawthorne Bridge, the atmosphere was vibrating with kinetic energy. I had assembled a war council. It was small, trusted, and entirely off the books. There was Sarah Jenkins, our finance director, whose eyes were rimmed with red from staring at spreadsheets for 48 hours straight. There was Marcus Thorne, our ethics chair, who looked like he had swallowed a lemon, and there was Ben, a second-year associate I had pulled from the research pool because he had a terrifying talent for finding things on the internet that people wanted hidden. We were building a wall, on the whiteboard. We had taped up a timeline that spanned the last 18 months. It was a chaotic web of events, dates and names, connected by red marker lines that looked like arterial sprays. "Okay, let us look at the sequence," I said, uncapping a fresh marker. I pointed to the far left. 18 months ago, I said, "Armitage Aeronautics receives a federal subpoena regarding the Model 88 thruster. Dawson and Klein is retained as outside counsel." I drew a line to the next point. 12 months ago. I continued. Dawson and Klein's Employment Defense Group disappears from the org chart. They start settling cases for cash. No discovery. Strict NDAs. 6 months ago. Sarah chimed in. The insurance switch. They drop their carrier of 20 years and pick up a surplus lines carrier with a $50 million excess tower. Premium jumps by 200%. 3 months ago. Marcus added. The partner exodus begins. Beatrice Vance sends the no paper trail memo. And last week, I finished, drawing a heavy circle around the final date. We receive the application, and Armitage sends a preservation notice. I step back. The whiteboard looked less like a business deal and more like an autopsy of a crime scene. It is a concealed internal crisis, Marcus said, his voice quiet. They are not just managing a bad year, they are managing a collapse. But why apply to us? Ben asked. He was young, still optimistic about the logic of the legal profession. Why not just declare bankruptcy and dissolve? Because of the liability tail. I said, if they dissolve, the partners are personally on the hook for any claims that exceed their insurance. But if they merge, Sarah finished, the successor firm, us, absorbs the liability. We become the deep pocket. Exactly. I said, Gordon isn't trying to save his firm. He is trying to launder his liability through ours. The door knocked. We all froze. It opened a crack. It was the receptionist, looking apologetic. Lily, she said, there is someone here to see you. He says it is urgent. He says he is from Dawson and Klein. I exchanged a look with Marcus. Who is it? He said his name is Leo. She said, he looks upset. Send him to my office. I said, not here. I left the war room and walked quickly to my office. Composing my face, I needed to look like a neutral party, not an investigator. Leo was sitting on the edge of my guest chair. He was young, maybe 27, with the frantic energy of a junior associate who hasn't slept in 3 days. He was clutching a briefcase like it was a flotation device. Ms. Martinez, he said, standing up as I entered. Thank you for seeing me. I didn't know who else to talk to. Sit down. Leo, I said, closing the door. You are safe here. What is going on? I need an ethics consult, he said, his voice trembling. I know you are the diligence lead. I checked the professional conduct rules. I can report a violation to the acquiring firm's counsel if I believe my current firm is committing a crime. You are correct, I said. Sitting behind my desk, everything you say is privileged. Talk to me. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a printout of an email. I work in the corporate group, he said, under Elias Thorne. Last week, Elias came to my office. He had a memo I wrote 6 months ago. It was a risk analysis for a client regarding environmental compliance. I nodded. Go on. He told me the memo was tonally incorrect, Leo said. He asked me to revise it. That happens. I said, partners edit work all the time. Not like this. Leo said. He told me to change the conclusion. In the original, I said the client was non-compliant and needed to self-report to the EPA. Elias wanted me to change it to say the regulations were ambiguous and self-reporting was optional. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Did you change it? He pushed the paper toward me. He told me to open the document metadata and change the creation date. He whispered, he wanted me to backdate the new version to replace the old one, so it would look like we gave them the safe advice 6 months ago. Spoliation of evidence, I said, and fraud. I told him I wasn't comfortable. Leo said, he told me that if I didn't demonstrate flexibility, I would be out of a job, and he said that in the new merged firm, there wouldn't be a place for rigid people. I looked at the email. It was a follow-up from Elias, Leo, confirming our conversation. Please ensure the file reflects the revised narrative by EOD. We need the file clean for the transition. Elias had put the order in writing. He was arrogant, or he was desperate. Leo, I said, looking up, you did the right thing coming here. Did you make the change? No. He said, I printed this and I walked out. I called in sick today. I slid the paper into my drawer. You are not going back there. What? We are going to bring you on as a contract attorney for Hawthorne Bridge, effective immediately. I said, we will stash you in document review until this blows over. You are a whistleblower now. Leo, and I protect my witnesses. He looked like he was going to cry. Thank you. After Leo left, I sat there for a long time. The timeline on the whiteboard was accurate, but it was incomplete. It wasn't just financial engineering. They were rewriting history. They were George Orwell in expensive suits. I needed to talk to Arthur. The partnership meeting that afternoon was supposed to be a routine status update. Instead, it turned into a brawl. The conference table was divided. On one side, Arthur and the growth faction. They looked at the Dawson and Klein revenue numbers, even the fake ones, and saw a golden ticket. On the other side, me, Marcus, and the skeptics. Arthur, I said, keeping my voice level, we cannot do this deal. We have evidence of backdating. We have evidence of inflated receivables. Arthur slammed his hand on the table. Every firm has dirty laundry. Lily, you are looking for a saint, and saints don't bill $800 an hour. This isn't dirty laundry, I snapped. This is a RICO case waiting to happen. If we merge, we inherit their fraud. Arthur stood up, pacing the room. You don't see the big picture. We have safeguards. We can indemnify against past acts. But if we walk away now, we look weak. The market will say we couldn't close the deal. We lose momentum. I would rather lose momentum than lose my license. I said. Arthur stopped and looked at me. His face was hard. Is this about the law, Lily? Or is this about your father? The room went silent. It was the accusation that had been hanging over my head since the beginning. Excuse me? I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous register. You are hunting him, Arthur said. Everyone can see it. You are turning over every rock. Not because you are diligent, but because you want to find a snake. You want to prove that the great Gordon Martinez is a fraud, so you can finally feel superior. I felt the blood rush to my face. It was a low blow, but it landed. I am looking for snakes because I don't want them biting us. I said. Arthur shook his head. The vote is Friday. Unless you can bring me something that proves, conclusively, that this firm is toxic, we are proceeding. The backdating? Elias can explain that as a draft error. The timeline? Circumstantial. Bring me a body, Lily, or let it go. I walked out of the meeting shaking with rage. I needed a body. I went back to the war room. Ben was there, eating a bagel. Ben, I said, pull the Dawson and Klein employee roster. The full one. Not just the attorneys. Everyone on payroll. He typed furiously. Got it. Filter by last name Martinez. He hit enter. 2 hits. Gordon Martinez. And, he squinted. Richard Martinez. Who is Richard Martinez? I asked. Listed as operations consultant. Ben said, non-attorney. Salary is wow. $200,000 a year. I knew that name. Ricky. My cousin. Ricky was the family screw-up. He had dropped out of college, tried to start a landscaping business, failed, and then vanished into the ether. I hadn't seen him at a Christmas party in 10 years. Gordon had hired him? Dig deeper. I said, what does Ricky do? Ben clicked around. No bio on the website, no LinkedIn. But here's an expense report. He charges a lot of mileage, and he has a corporate credit card with heavy charges at U-Store-It facilities and a private security firm. My mind raced back to Julian, the associate who told me about the boxes. I drove them to a private address. Ricky wasn't an operations consultant. He was the bagman. He was the one physically moving the evidence. Gordon couldn't ask a partner to hide boxes in a garage. That was too risky. But family? Family does what they are told. I needed to rattle the cage. I called Gordon. He answered on the second ring. Lily, to what do I owe the pleasure? I am confused. Gordon, I said, keeping my tone conversational. About what? I am looking at the org chart. I see you hired Ricky. There was a pause, a long one. Richard needed a job, Gordon said, his voice tight. Family helps family. He manages our facilities. Facilities, I repeated. Like storage? He handles logistics. Gordon said, "Why does this matter?" "Because I have a witness who says files were moved to a private residence." I said, "And I have an expense report showing Ricky renting a U-Haul van at midnight 3 weeks ago." "That is ridiculous." Gordon said, "We were moving furniture. We are renovating the 12th floor." "Renovating furniture at midnight?" I asked. "Into a house?" "It was temporary storage." Gordon snapped, "You are grasping at straws." "Lily, where is the house?" "Gordon?" I asked. "I don't know," he said quickly. "Ricky handled it. It was some rental." "Really?" I asked. "Because Julian said he saw you there." "In a tracksuit." Gordon went silent. I could hear his breathing. "I was checking the inventory," he said finally. "So you admit you were at the house?" I pressed. "I admit I supervise my employees," he shouted. "And the address?" I asked. "Was it the property on Highland Avenue?" "No," he said immediately. "It was the one on Sycamore." I smiled. I hadn't known the address. I had guessed Highland because it was a common street name. "Sycamore," I said, writing it down. "Thank you, Gordon. That is very helpful." He hung up. He realized too late that he had just given me the location of the body. I handed the sticky note to Ben. "Find out who owns the house on Sycamore Street and see if we can get a satellite image of the driveway." I sat back, feeling a grim satisfaction, but it was short-lived. My cell phone rang. It was my mother, Lily. She said, her voice was different today, less fearful, more resigned. "Hi, Mom, I need to tell you something," she said. "I have been thinking about our conversation, about why your father treated you that way." "Mom, we don't have to—" "We do," she interrupted, "because there is something I never told you, something he made me swear to keep secret." I waited. "Do you remember when you applied for that associate position at Skadden?" she asked, "right out of law school?" I remembered. It was my dream job. I had the grades. I had the interview. I thought I nailed it. Then I got a rejection letter that was unusually cold. I remember. I said, I was devastated. "You didn't get rejected because of your interview." "Lily." I felt the room tilt. "What do you mean?" "Your father called the hiring partner." She said, "They went to law school together. Gordon told him that you weren't built for pressure." I gripped the phone. "He what?" "He told him that you had a nervous breakdown in your second year." She said, "It was a lie, obviously, but he said he was worried that the hours at a firm like Skadden would break you." He asked the partner, "As a personal favor, not to hire you, for your own good." I couldn't breathe. I sat there, 17 years of self-doubt flashing before my eyes. I had spent a decade thinking I wasn't good enough, thinking I had failed the interview, thinking I was flawed. But I wasn't flawed. I was sabotaged. "He clipped my wings," I whispered. "He wanted you at a smaller firm." She said, "Somewhere he could ignore you. Somewhere you wouldn't be a threat. He knew if you went to Skadden, you would become a titan, and you might come for him." "He was right." I said, "Lily?" "He was right. Mom, I am coming for him." I hung up. The pain was physical. It felt like a hot iron in my chest. But then, just as quickly as it came, the pain cooled. It hardened. It turned into something useful. I wasn't the hysterical daughter. I was the competitor he was so afraid of that he had to cheat to beat me. I walked out of my office and found Arthur. "We need to talk," I said. "Not now." "Lily, now." "Arthur." I marched him into his office. "We just got a letter." I lied. "From who?" "From the State Bar Disciplinary Committee." Arthur turned pale. "What?" "They are inquiring about our conflict check procedures regarding the Dawson and Klein acquisition. I hadn't received a letter, but I knew one was coming. The rumors were out. Someone is talking." I said, "Someone knows we are about to inherit a toxic waste dump. If the bar is asking questions now, imagine what happens when we sign." Arthur sat down heavily. "This is a disaster. It is only a disaster if we close blindly." I said, "I have a solution." "What?" "We issue a final demand, a hard condition. If Dawson and Klein wants in, they must disclose every pending claim, complaint, investigation, and settlement. No redactions, no privilege logs. We get the raw files. They will never agree." Arthur said, If they don't, I said, then we know. And we walk away. And we tell the bar we did our diligence and found them wanting. We save our reputation. Arthur looked at me. He looked at the imaginary letter in my hand. Do it, he said. The meeting was set for the next morning. Gordon didn't come. He sent Elias and Beatrice. They looked like they were walking to the gallows. I sat at the head of the table. I didn't have any notes. I didn't need them. Here's the situation. I said, we have identified significant discrepancies in your financials. We have witness testimony regarding spoliation of evidence, and we have reason to believe there is an undisclosed federal investigation involving your former client. Armitage Aeronautics. Elias opened his mouth to object. I held up a hand. I am not finished. Hawthorne Bridge is prepared to move forward with the acquisition, provided you sign a disclosure warranty. I slid a document across the table. This states that you have disclosed every material fact regarding liability. It lists specific categories: the Armitage subpoena, the location of the files on Sycamore Street, the backdated memos. If you sign this, and we find one piece of paper that contradicts it, the deal is void, and we report you to the authorities. Elias picked up the paper. His hands were shaking. This is a hostile interrogation, not a negotiation. He said, it is due diligence. Elias. Beatrice looked at me. Her eyes were cold, hard beads. You are enjoying this, aren't you? She said. I looked at her. You are acting out of family resentment. She spat. This isn't about the law. This is about a little girl who is angry that her daddy didn't love her enough. You are unfit to lead this process. Lily, you are compromised. The room went dead silent. Arthur looked at me, waiting for the explosion. I looked at Beatrice. I thought about the job at Skadden. I thought about the lies. I thought about the boxes in the garage. I leaned forward. Repeat that. I said softly. What? Beatrice blinked. Repeat that for the record. I said, pointing to the court reporter I had brought in for the meeting. Say it again. Tell the record that you are refusing to sign a standard disclosure warranty because you believe my professional judgment is clouded by emotion. Go ahead. I want that in the transcript when the DOJ subpoenas these minutes. Beatrice's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at the court reporter, then back at me. She withered. We need time to consider. Elias mumbled. You have 24 hours, I said. They left the room in a hurry. Arthur looked at me with a new expression. It wasn't annoyance anymore. It was respect, and maybe a little fear. You didn't tell me about the Sycamore Street house. He said, I am saving the best for last. I said, I worked late that night. I was the last one in the office. I was packing up my bag when my cell phone buzzed. Visual voicemail. Unknown number. I tapped play. The voice was distorted, low, synthesized, but the cadence was familiar. If you sign them in, you will be signing your own name onto what they did. Don't let him hand you his sins. He is not looking for a partner. He is looking for a sacrifice. The message ended. I stood there in the dark office, the city lights reflecting in the glass. I knew who it was. It wasn't a whistleblower. It wasn't a rival. It was Ricky, my cousin, the bagman. Even the family screw-up knew that what Gordon was doing was wrong. I looked at the phone. Don't let him hand you his sins. I wasn't going to. I was going to hand them right back. Part 4 ended with the silence of the room pressing in on me. But for the first time, I didn't feel alone. I felt the weight of the truth. And it was a weapon I was finally ready to use. The clock on the wall of the war room moved with a sluggish, malicious tick. It was Tuesday morning. The partnership vote was scheduled for Friday at noon. 72 hours. 72 hours to turn a suspicion into a verdict. I stood before the whiteboard, which was now covered in a chaotic web of sticky notes and red marker lines. My internal risk team, Sarah Jenkins and Ben the associate, looked like they had been living in this room for a month. Empty coffee cups built a skyline on the table. We have the smoke, I said, staring at the timeline, the missing files, the insurance spike, the backdated memo. But we don't have the fire. We don't have the one document that proves Gordon Martinez knew. specifically and intentionally, that he was committing a crime. If we go to the vote with this, Sarah said, rubbing her eyes, the growth faction will shout us down. They will say it is all circumstantial. They will say we are paranoid. I need something admissible. I said, I need something that wasn't stolen from a garage or whispered in a dive bar. I need something that came through the front door. I went back to my office and closed the door. I needed to talk to the victim. Armitage Aeronautics was a fortress. Their current legal team would never talk to me. But people leave fortresses. People get tired of the siege. I spent an hour cross-referencing LinkedIn profiles with the Dawson and Klein service list. I found him, Samuel Wright. He had been a deputy general counsel at Armitage for 6 years, overseeing regulatory compliance. He had left the company 8 months ago to join a quiet, mid-sized manufacturing firm in Ohio. He was out of the blast zone. I didn't email him. Electronic discovery is a double-edged sword. I called him on his direct line at his new job. Mr. Wright, I said when he answered. My name is Lily Martinez. I am a partner at Hawthorne Bridge Legal Group. There was a silence on the line. Heavy, watchful. I know who you are, he said, and I know who your father is. I am not calling for my father. I said, I am calling because my firm is considering a transaction with Dawson and Klein. I am conducting due diligence. I want to ask you a general question about your experience with their risk management advisory services. I cannot discuss specific matters. He said instantly, Privilege. I understand. I said, I'm not asking about the Model 88 thruster. I am not asking about the DOJ. Another pause. How do you know about the DOJ? I didn't answer that. I pivoted. Mr. Wright, hypothetically, if a client comes to outside counsel with a compliance irregularity, say, a test result that doesn't match the federal standard, what is the standard of care you expect? I expect them to tell me how to fix it, Wright said. His voice was tight. I expect them to tell me how to self-report, how to mitigate, and how to survive the audit. And if outside counsel suggests that the test result is open to interpretation, I asked, if they suggest that the narrative is more important than the data, then they aren't lawyers, Wright said. They are fiction writers. He took a breath. Ms. Martinez, he said. I left my previous position because I became uncomfortable with the creative writing process. I wanted to report a fire. My advisors told me I was just seeing a sunset. And did they suggest you buy curtains to block the view? I asked. They suggested that if I kept looking at the fire, I might burn my eyes, he said. And then they suggested that perhaps I wasn't a good fit for the team. Thank you. Mr. Wright, I said, you have been very helpful. I hung up. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was a ballistics match. Dawson and Klein hadn't just defended Armitage. They had actively suppressed internal whistleblowers. They had created clean narratives to hide dirty facts. I walked back to the war room. Sarah, I said, look at the vendor payments. Look for anything labeled consulting or advisory that isn't a law firm or an accounting firm. She tapped away at her laptop. I have something weird. She said after a few minutes, a company called Veritas Strategic. Dawson and Klein has been paying them $25,000 a month for the last year. Who are they? I am looking at their website. Ben said, it is just a landing page. Crisis management, reputation defense, narrative control. Reputation management. I said, you hire a firm like that when you have a scandal that is about to break, and you want to bury the search results. You don't pay $25,000 a month for SEO. You pay it for silence. Print it. I said, that evening, I was in my apartment, staring at the city lights. My dining table was covered in the documents we had gathered. It looked like a prosecution file. The buzzer rang. I walked to the intercom. Yes? It is me, a voice said. Gordon. I buzzed him in. I left the door unlocked and went back to the window. I didn't want him to see me tidying up. I didn't want him to think I cared. He walked in. He looked older than he had at the cafe. His suit was rumpled, which was a tectonic shift for a man who used to iron his socks. He stood in the entryway, looking at the papers on my table. You have been busy, he said. I am doing my job. Gordon, The job you said I wasn't built for." He flinched. He walked over to the sofa and sat down. Heavily. He didn't ask for a drink. He just looked at his hands. "Lily," he said softly, "I want to tell you something. Something I have never told anyone." I stayed by the window. "I am listening. Do you know why I was so hard on you?" he asked. "Why I critiqued your mock trial performance in high school until you cried? Why I told the partners you were fragile? Because you are a narcissist?" I suggested. "Because I was terrified," he said. He looked up at me. His eyes were wet. "I watched you. Lily, in law school, you didn't just understand the law. You felt it. You had this moral clarity. It was blinding. I looked at you, and I saw everything I wasn't." He took a breath. "I knew that if you came to Dawson and Klein, if you worked under me, you would surpass me. Within 5 years, you would have been running the place, and you would have looked at what I built, the compromises, the gray areas, and you would have been disgusted. I couldn't bear the thought of my own daughter looking at me with contempt, so you broke me instead." I said, my voice was trembling. "Despite my best efforts, you decided it was better for me to think I was a failure than for you to feel insecure." "It wasn't just insecurity," he said. "It was survival. I wanted to keep you pure. Lily, I wanted you to be a real lawyer, the kind I couldn't be. I pushed you away to save you from my world. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, I felt the armor crack. I saw the sad, broken man beneath the monster. I saw a father who, in his twisted, selfish way, thought he was protecting his child from the mud he lived in. I took a step toward him. "Gordon," I started. He stood up, his energy shifting instantly. "But that is in the past," he said, his voice gaining strength. "We can fix it now. We can be a team. I am offering you the keys to the kingdom. Lily, all you have to do is get this deal done. Just sign the papers. Let the past stay buried. We can manage the Armitage thing. We can pay the fines. But we need the merger to survive the cash flow hit." I stopped. The crack in my armor sealed shut, stronger than before. He hadn't come here to apologize. He had come here to manipulate me. He was using his own vulnerability as a bargaining chip. He was trading his confession for my compliance. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't see a giant. I saw a beggar in a 3-piece suit. "Get out," I said. "Lily, please, get out," I shouted. "You didn't come here to make amends. You came here to recruit an accomplice. I am not your accomplice. Gordon, I am your due diligence, and you are failing." He stared at me for a long moment. The sadness vanished, replaced by the cold, hard stare of the negotiator. "You are making a mistake, counsel," he said. He walked out. The door clicked shut. I sank onto the floor and put my head in my hands. I cried for exactly 60 seconds. Then I stood up, went to the bathroom, washed my face, and went back to the table. He wanted a real lawyer? He was about to get one. The next morning, Arthur called me into his office. He looked uncomfortable. "Lily," he said, "I have been talking to the executive committee. We are concerned about you." "Concerned about what?" "Your well-being," he said. "This process. It is clearly personal. The shouting match with Beatrice? The late nights? We think you are too close to the flame." I sat very still. "You want to remove me. We want to offer you an out," he corrected. "Recuse yourself from the final vote. Step away from the negotiation. Take a month off. Go to Europe. We will handle the closing. We will ensure the indemnities are strong." I looked at Arthur. I had known him for 10 years. He was a decent man, but he was weak. He wanted the growth, the prestige, the money. He didn't want the fight. "If I step away," I said, "you will sign. We will make a business decision based on the risk-reward profile." He said, "No, Arthur." I said, "If I step away, you will sign a death warrant for this firm. I am not stepping away. I helped build this place. I laid the bricks. I'm not going to let you burn it down because you are too dazzled by the purchase price to see the termites." Arthur sighed. "We can't force you out. Lily, you are a name partner. But if you tank this deal without absolute proof, the partnership will never forgive you. You will be a pariah in your own firm. I can live with being a pariah. I said, I cannot live with being a defendant. I went back to my desk. I opened my laptop to check the legal news sites, a habit I had formed since the rumors started. There it was. On the Gavel, a popular Briarhaven legal blog. Exclusive. Hawthorne Bridge, poised for historic acquisition of Dawson and Klein. Sources close to the deal report that the mid-sized powerhouse Hawthorne Bridge is days away from finalizing a takeover of the legendary Dawson and Klein. The move is described as a strategic consolidation that will create the largest litigation practice in the state. I felt the blood drain from my face. They leaked it. They framed it as a done deal. They framed it as a victory. If we walked away now, it wouldn't just be a failed negotiation. It would be a public embarrassment. It would look like Hawthorne Bridge got cold feet or couldn't come up with the money. But the leak hadn't come from Dawson and Klein. The article quoted a source within Hawthorne leadership. I stormed down the hallway to Thomas Sterling's office. Thomas, no relation to the opposing counsel, was a senior partner in our corporate group. He had been the loudest voice for the merger. He had been checking his watch during my risk presentations. I walked in without knocking. "Did you talk to the Gavel?" I asked. Thomas looked up from his putting mat. He didn't even blink. Someone had to control the narrative. "Lily, you were letting it drift. You leaked a confidential negotiation to a blog?" I asked. "Do you realize how reckless that is? If this deal falls through, we look like amateurs." "It won't fall through," Thomas said, putting his putter down. "Public pressure is a wonderful closer, now that it is out there. Arthur won't back down. We are going to be the biggest firm in the city. Lily, get on board or get out of the way." I looked at him. He was wearing a grin that was all teeth and ambition. "This is how the world works." "Lily," he said, echoing the cynicism I had heard my entire life. "You leverage perception to create reality." I saw it then. The infection wasn't just coming from the outside, it was already here. Thomas was Gordon, just 20 years younger and with less finesse. The old guard contempt for ethics, the belief that winning justified the means. It was a virus, and my firm had caught it. "I am not getting out of the way." "Thomas," I said, "I am inspecting the track." I walked out. I needed the kill shot. The timeline was closing. The leak had accelerated everything. The vote was in 48 hours. I went to the data room team. Ben was asleep with his head on a stack of files. "Wake up, Ben," I said. He sat up, wiping drool from his chin. "What? What happened?" "We are looking in the wrong place," I said. "We have been looking for files labeled Armitage or liability, but they are smarter than that. They wouldn't label the smoking gun with the name of the victim. What do we look for?" "Look for the administration files." I said, "Look for the boring stuff. IT requests, calendar invites, risk management circulars. Look for anything from Gordon to the executive committee in the week leading up to the Armitage preservation notice." We spent 4 hours searching. My eyes were burning. Then, at 2 a.m, I found it. It wasn't in a folder. It was an attachment to an attachment, a forwarded email chain inside a calendar invite for a strategy lunch. The subject line was innocuous. Project Blue. Sensitivity analysis. I opened it. It was an email from the Dawson and Klein ethics officer, a man named Peter who had resigned 3 months ago. "Gordon," the email read, "I have reviewed the proposed response to the Armitage internal query. I must go on record stating that omitting the test data from the Q3 report constitutes a material misrepresentation. We are not just advocating for the client. We are actively concealing a defect. If this comes out, the firm is liable for aiding and abetting fraud. We must disclose," and below it, the reply from Gordon Martinez, Peter. "We are paid to solve problems, not create them. The data is ambiguous. The narrative is what matters. We can manage perception. Do not send the disclosure. That is a directive. We can manage perception." It was the smoking gun. It was a direct order to conceal evidence of a crime, over the objection of his own ethics officer. It proved knowledge. It proved intent. It proved that Gordon wasn't just negligent. He was a co-conspirator. I printed it. I made 3 copies. I scanned it to a secure drive. I looked at Ben. Go home. Ben, you did good. I didn't sleep. The next morning, Thursday, was the final negotiation session before the vote. The room was packed. Arthur, Thomas, Sarah, Marcus, across from us, Gordon, Elias, Beatrice. The mood was triumphant on their side. They had seen the blog post. They thought they had won. Gordon looked refreshed. He nodded at me, a small, patronizing smile on his lips. He thought his visit to my apartment had worked. He thought he had neutralized me. Let us finalize the terms, Elias said. We have the closing documents ready for signature. One moment. I said, I didn't stand up. I didn't raise my voice. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded on the table. We have a final condition, I said. Elias sighed. Lily, we discussed this. No more conditions. The deal is structured. This is non-negotiable. I said. I slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It wasn't the email. Not yet. It was a term sheet. Before we sign, I said, Dawson and Klein agrees to an immediate, independent forensic investigation. This investigation will be conducted by a third-party firm of Hawthorne Bridge's choosing. They will have full access to all servers, all email archives, and all financial records. I paused. Furthermore, we require a clause that specifically indemnifies Hawthorne Bridge against any claims arising from the Armitage Aeronautics representation. And, this is the key, we require full notification to all current and former clients that their files are being reviewed for potential ethical breaches. The room exploded. This is insanity, Elias shouted. You are asking us to indict ourselves before we even merge. You are asking us to destroy our client relationships, Beatrice cried. Notification of ethical review? That is suicide. Gordon sat quietly, watching me. We cannot agree to this, Gordon said, his voice calm but icy. It shows a fundamental lack of trust. If this is your condition, Lily, we are walking away. Thomas leaned over to me. Lily, are you crazy? You are killing the deal. I looked at Thomas. Then I looked at Gordon. I am not killing the deal. Thomas, I said, I am saving us from an accomplice charge. I reached into my folder and pulled out the email. The We Can Manage Perception email. I didn't pass it around. I just held it up, facing Gordon. I found the Project Blue email. Gordon, I said. Gordon went still. His eyes locked onto the paper. He recognized it. I know you ordered Peter to suppress the test data. I said, I know you called it managing perception. That is a felony. Gordon, and if we sign this deal without an investigation, we become accessories after the fact. The room went silent. Arthur looked from me to the paper to Gordon. Is that true? Arthur asked, his voice shaking. Gordon didn't answer Arthur. He kept his eyes on me. You are bluffing, Gordon said. You won't use that. It destroys me. I am not bluffing. I said, I am practicing law. I placed the email on the table. The condition stands. I said, independent investigation, full disclosure, or we walk, and I send this email to the state bar. Gordon's face turned a color I had never seen, a mix of gray and purple. He looked at his partners. Elias looked sick. Beatrice was staring at the table. We walk, Elias said. Standing up, we are done here. This is a hostile environment. We are pulling the application. He looked at Gordon, expecting him to stand up. Gordon didn't move. Gordon? Elias said. Let's go. We will find another buyer. Gordon didn't move. He couldn't. And then, the realization hit me. It hit me like a physical blow. They weren't threatening to walk because they were offended. They were threatening to walk because it was the only card they had left. But Gordon wasn't playing it. Why? Why wouldn't he just leave? Why sit there and take the humiliation? Unless he couldn't leave. I looked at the date on the email. I looked at the preservation notice. And then I looked at the news ticker on the TV screen mounted on the wall of the conference room, which was muted but playing CNN, breaking news. The headline scrolled across the bottom in red. Armitage Aeronautics to announce major settlement with DOJ regarding defective thrusters. Sources say whistleblower lawsuit names outside counsel as co-conspirators. The breath left my body. It wasn't days away. It wasn't weeks away. It was today. Gordon wasn't planning to walk away. He couldn't walk away. The story was breaking. The indictment was coming. He had been trying to get us to sign the papers before the news hit. He had been racing the clock, and he had lost by minutes. I looked at Gordon. He was staring at the TV screen. His expression was one of total, abject defeat. He wasn't a titan anymore. He wasn't a monster. He was a man standing in a burning building. Realizing the fire escape was locked. "You can't walk, can you?" I whispered. The room turned to look at the TV. Arthur gasped. Thomas dropped his pen. "It is over." "Gordon," I said. Part 5 ended with the silence of a tomb. The deal was dead, but the wreckage was just beginning, and I was the only one holding the black box. The conference room smelled of cold coffee and panic. The silence that had descended following the news ticker on the television screen was not peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, the kind of silence that precedes a structural collapse. Arthur sat at the head of the table, his face the color of old parchment. Thomas, the partner who had leaked the story to the blog only hours earlier, was staring at his phone, scrolling frantically, likely watching his premature victory lap turn into a public relations funeral. Gordon remained seated. He had recovered his composure with terrifying speed. The shock I had seen on his face when the news broke was gone, replaced by the mask I knew better than my own reflection, the mask of the misunderstood visionary. "We need to clear the room," Elias Thorne said, his voice cracking. "We need a privileged caucus." "No," I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the murmurs like a scalpel. "We are not clearing the room. We are finishing this." Arthur looked at me. He looked lost. "Lily, the news." "If Armitage is settling with the Department of Justice," I said, standing up. "That means they have admitted to the defect. And now that they have admitted it, they are going to look for someone to blame for the cover-up. That ticker tape wasn't just a headline. Arthur, it was a prologue." Gordon stood up then. He buttoned his jacket, a slow, deliberate movement. "You are being dramatic." "Lily," he said. His voice was warm, almost affectionate. It was the voice he used when I was 12 and scraped my knee. The voice that said, "Pain is just a perception." He turned to the partners of Hawthorne Bridge. "My daughter has a brilliant legal mind," Gordon said, gesturing to me with an open hand. "Truly, I have never denied that. She has an eye for detail that is unmatched, but she lacks perspective. She sees a settlement and sees a disaster. I see a market correction. Armitage is cleaning house. This is standard corporate maneuvering. It does not implicate us." He was doing it again. He was complimenting me to undermine me. He was painting my diligence as anxiety, my ethics as inexperience. He walked around the table, positioning himself as the elder statesman in a room of children. "Lily is right to be cautious," he continued. "Caution is a virtue in a junior partner, but we are leaders. We understand that risk is the price of admission. If you walk away now because of a news cycle, you are not just losing a merger, you are admitting you don't have the stomach for the big leagues." I felt the eyes in the room shift. Thomas was nodding. Even Arthur looked uncertain. Gordon was a master. He could sell sand to a drowning man. I let him finish. I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable again. "Are you finished?" "Gordon?" I asked. He smiled at me, a sad, benevolent smile. "I am just trying to help you see the bigger picture." "Honey," I didn't flinch at the pet name. I opened the file folder in front of me. "Let us talk about the picture," I said. "You say this doesn't implicate you." I pulled out a document. 3 weeks ago," I said, looking at Elias. You ordered a junior associate to backdate a risk memo to make it look like you advised Armitage to self-report. That is not a market correction. That is fraud. Elias opened his mouth. But I didn't stop. I pulled out another document. 6 months ago, you purchased a $50 million excess liability policy from a surplus lines carrier at triple the market rate. You didn't do that for perspective. You did that because you knew the claim was coming. I looked at Beatrice Vance. And you, Beatrice, you issued a verbal directive to staff to stop using email and to store files in hard copy only. You called it data hygiene. The Department of Justice calls it obstruction. Beatrice looked down at her hands. Gordon chuckled softly. Circumstantial. Lily, you are connecting dots that aren't there. I looked at him. Then explain the Sycamore Street house. Gordon, the smile vanished. Explain why my cousin Ricky was paid $200,000 to rent a private residence and move 300 boxes of client files into the garage in the middle of the night. Explain why those files are not in your index. Explain why you were seen there, personally supervising the load-in. The room was deadly quiet now. Arthur was staring at Gordon with horror. And explain this, I said. I picked up the email, the one I had found at 2 a.m, the one that proved everything. This is an email from you to your former ethics officer. I said, he advised you to disclose the test data. He told you that hiding it was a crime, and you replied, we can manage perception. Do not send the disclosure. That is a directive. I slid the paper down the long mahogany table. It hissed against the varnish. It stopped in front of Arthur. He picked it up. He read it. His hands started to shake. You managed perception. Gordon, I said, you managed it right into a federal indictment. Gordon looked at the email. He didn't touch it. He looked at me, and for the first time, the mask slipped completely. There was no benevolence left. There was only a cold, reptilian hatred. You stole that, he whispered. I obtained it through legitimate discovery of your own servers. I said, you were sloppy. Gordon, you thought you deleted it. But you just archived it. You are not a tech company. You are a dinosaur. Thomas Sterling, who had been the biggest champion of the deal, stood up. He walked over to Arthur, looked at the email, and turned to Gordon. Is this authentic? Thomas asked. Gordon straightened his tie. It is a draft. It was a discussion of strategy. It was never implemented. The ethics officer resigned 3 days later. I said, that suggests it was implemented. Elias Thorne slammed his hand on the table. Enough, he shouted. This is a hostile ambush. We are not going to sit here and be interrogated by a disgruntled daughter. Sit down. Elias, Arthur said. His voice was low, but it had a new weight to it. We have a proposal, Elias said, ignoring him. He was sweating now. Desperate. If you are concerned about the legacy liability, we structure this differently. We don't do a merger. We do an asset purchase. I watched them pivot. It was a classic move. We sell you the client list, the leases, and the brand, Elias said, talking fast. We keep the partnership entity alive to handle the Armitage claim. We ring-fence the liability. You get the revenue. We keep the risk. It is a clean break. Arthur looked at me. He wanted to believe it. He wanted the revenue without the poison. Can we do that? Arthur asked. No. I said, why not? Thomas asked. It makes sense. We buy the good. We leave the bad. Because you cannot buy the fruit of a poisonous tree. I said. I turned to the partners. If we buy their assets, their client list, we are buying clients who were lied to. We are buying files that are incomplete. We are bringing over partners who have been trained to shred evidence. I pointed at Gordon, and under the law of successor liability, if the transaction is deemed a de facto merger, which this would be, since we are taking their office and their staff, the court will pierce the corporate veil. The judge won't care that we called it an asset purchase. He will see that we took the money and left the victims with an empty shell. He will come after us. But we can indemnify, Elias pleaded. Indemnification is only as good as the money behind it, I said, and once Armitage sues you, you will be bankrupt. Your indemnification is a worthless piece of paper. I looked at Arthur. If we do this, I said, we are not just buying a firm, we are buying a conspiracy, and I will not sign it. The room hung in the balance. The greed of the partners was warring with their fear. I could see Thomas calculating the odds, and then the phone in the center of the table buzzed. It was the conference line. The light blinked red. "It is the reception desk," Arthur said. He pressed the button. "Yes?" "Mr. Penhaligon." The receptionist's voice was trembling. "I have a process server in the lobby." Arthur froze. "For who?" "For Dawson and Klein," she said. "And for us." "For us?" Arthur whispered. "He says he has a courtesy copy of a complaint filed in the Southern District." She said, "The plaintiff is Armitage Aeronautics. Read the caption." I said. There was a rustling of paper over the speaker. Armitage Aeronautics versus Dawson and Klein LLP, Gordon Martinez, Elias Thorne. She paused. And Hawthorne Bridge Legal Group. Nominal defendant. The room stopped breathing. "Why are we named?" Thomas screamed. "We haven't bought them yet." "We are named as a necessary party to prevent the transfer of assets," I said calmly. "Armitage knows about the negotiations. They are freezing the deal. They are getting a temporary restraining order to stop Gordon from selling the furniture before he pays for the fire." I looked at Gordon. "It is over," I said. "They beat you to the exit." Gordon didn't look at the speakerphone. He looked at me. His face was gray. "Can I speak to my daughter?" he asked. "Alone." Arthur looked at me. I nodded. "Everyone out," Arthur said. The partners filed out. Elias looked like a dead man walking. Beatrice was crying silently. Arthur stopped at the door. "Lily," he said, "be careful." I waited until the heavy glass door clicked shut. Gordon and I were alone in the room where he had tried to sell me his sins. He walked to the window. He looked out at the city he had helped build. The city he had ruled for 30 years. "You did this," he said. He didn't shout. His voice was hollow. "I didn't file the lawsuit." "Gordon, you gave them the roadmap," he said. Turning to face me, "You poked around. You asked questions. You called Samuel Wright. You tipped them off that we were vulnerable. I did my job." I said, "You destroyed your inheritance," he said. "Do you realize that? This firm, it was supposed to be yours, all of it. The money, the power, the reputation. I was building it for you." I laughed. It was a bleak, humorless sound. "You were building it for me?" I asked. "Is that why you told the Skadden partner I was unstable? Is that why you told everyone I was weak?" He flinched. "I did what I had to do," he said. "I built a wall around you to keep you out of the line of fire. And then, when I needed you, when I finally let you in, you brought a grenade. I didn't bring the grenade." "Gordon," I said, "you have been sitting on it for 20 years. I just pointed out that the pin was pulled." He walked over to the table and sat down. He slumped. For the first time in my life, he looked small. He looked like an old man who was afraid of the dark. "I was afraid," he whispered. "Afraid of what?" "Of failing," he said. "Of being average. I started with nothing. Lily, my father was a janitor. I wanted to be a giant. And when you are building a skyscraper, you don't worry about the cracks in the foundation. You just keep building. You cover them up. And then, you can't stop, because if you stop, the whole thing comes down." He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "I protected the firm. Lily, I protected the families of my partners. I protected the staff. I made the hard choices so they could have paychecks. And now you are going to let them all burn. You didn't protect them," I said. "You deceived them. And now they are going to pay the price for your arrogance." He reached across the table. He tried to take my hand. I pulled it away. "Lily, please," he said. "There is still a way. We can fight the restraining order. We can delay the filing. If you convince your partners to sign the asset purchase today, we can move the money offshore before the freeze hits. We can save something." He was still doing it. He was still trying to fix it. He couldn't see that the house was already ash. "Don't do this to me," he begged. His voice broke. I am your father. Don't let me die in disgrace. Don't be the one holding the knife. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had terrified me, controlled me, and shamed me. I looked at the man whose approval I had chased until my lungs burned. And I felt nothing. No hate, no love, just a profound, quiet clarity. I am not holding a knife, Gordon, I said. I pointed to the reflection in the glass wall of the conference room. I am holding a mirror, I said. You are just finally seeing yourself. I stood up. I am going to walk out that door. I said, I am going to advise my partners to formally reject the application. We will issue a statement cooperating fully with the Armitage investigation. We will turn over every document in the data room to the Department of Justice. Gordon's eyes went wide. You can't. That is privileged. The crime fraud exception applies. I said, privilege does not cover a conspiracy to commit a felony. We are not your lawyers. Gordon, we are witnesses. He put his head in his hands. I walked to the door. Lily, he whispered. I stopped. You will never be a real lawyer, he said. His voice was muffled, venomous. You are a traitor. I opened the door. I am the only real lawyer in this room. I said. I walked out. The hallway was crowded with my partners. They looked at me with a mixture of awe and terror. I was the woman who had just executed her own father. Arthur stepped forward. Lily? Draft the rejection letter, I said, effective immediately. Cite material breach of disclosure obligations in the pending litigation, and call the DOJ. Tell them we are preserving all records. Thomas looked at me. He looked pale. Lily, this is going to blow up the market. The gossip. Let them talk, I said. I would rather be talked about than indicted. I walked past them, down the long corridor of Hawthorne Bridge. I didn't go to my office. I walked to the elevator. I pressed the down button. I needed air, outside. The Briarhaven wind was cold. It smelled of rain and exhaust. I stood on the corner, watching the traffic. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. I heard the news. Are you okay? I typed back. I am free. I looked up at the building across the river. The Dawson and Klein Tower. It looked solid, imposing, permanent. But I knew the truth. It was already falling. I had made the choice. I had chosen the hard, brutal path of the truth. I had saved my firm, my team, and my soul. But I knew the cost. The legal world would whisper. They would say I was ruthless. They would say I was a patricide. My father would spend his final years in court or in prison, and he would curse my name to anyone who would listen. I took a deep breath, let him talk. I turned and walked away from the river, into the crowd. Just another lawyer in a city of sharks. But for the first time, I wasn't swimming for my life. I was the one deciding the current. The ending wasn't happy. It wasn't clean, but it was mine. Thank you for listening to Dad Said You'll Never Be a Real Lawyer. His firm applied to mine. This story was a journey into the dark heart of corporate law and the complicated, often painful dynamics of family and legacy. I hope you felt the tension in every negotiation and the weight of every choice Lily had to make. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you tuning in from a law office in New York, a commute in London, or a quiet room in Tokyo? Please leave a comment below and share your location. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. We bring you realistic, emotionally grounded dramas about justice, betrayal, and the price of winning. And finally, I want to hear your thoughts. Did Lily make the right choice? Should she have tried to save her father, or was she right to let him fall? Share your perspective in the comments in English. I read every single one. Until next time.